and welcome to the Security Collective podcast. I'm your host, Claire Pales, and today's guest is Ben Jones. Ben's mission is simple. He wants to secure small business. There's no panacea to the threat of cybercrime, but you can take a measured approach to reducing your risks. Today, criminals are just as likely to disrupt small business as they would a major enterprise, and the world has changed in so many ways in the past year, and having a digital and online presence is fundamental. To thrive and survive, it's imperative that you prioritise your security, and so Ben works tirelessly to deliver what is most important to business owners, which is certainty. And he believes that it enables them to focus on running their business, not on running security. Ben, it is great to have you chatting to me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Claire. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm very, very grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
So you're actually a psychologist running a cybersecurity startup. How did you get to here?
Yeah, my background in my first sort of career in life was, studied psychology and then went into the caring profession. So I worked with young people in oncology. So I worked specifically in a very sort of niche of teenagers with cancer. So I did a lot of end-of-life care, or when they were going through chemotherapy or radiotherapy. I guess the relationship was really just about helping people come to terms with sort of the end of their life or a pretty dire situation that they were in. They find themselves in. And in teenagers, cancer is quite aggressive because they're going through they're going through puberty, so cellular growth is often accelerated, and diagnosis is often late stage because presentation is quite a difficult thing for a teenager with cancer. I did that for many, many years and was a real privilege to work with young people. But upon reflection, it's a million miles away from, I guess, cybersecurity. But I'm very grateful to have had the honour to have worked with those young, vulnerable people and worked with some great organisations in some great hospitals. And ultimately, that work stream or that profession got me to move to Australia as well. So I was gifted that to where I've got my family here now after 16 years. And I worked for a great organisation called Canteen here. You might remember they do the bandanas every year. And that was a little bit of a departure because we could work with teenagers whose mums and dads had been diagnosed or had died as well, or brothers and sisters. So it wasn't just the patients, it was all that sort of holistic view of everyone that's impacted by a cancer diagnosis. So and then I got to sort of my early 30s and decided I want to go into business, and I joined a big drug company, AstraZeneca, which is topical at the moment, and they were great because they sort of really, being such a big business, they really invested in me and learning how to do sales. And I sold, I worked as a GP rep, started right at the bottom and worked my way up. And I got a little Camry and a little bag full of free stomach tablets for doctors, and went and bought sandwiches for them. But the company was very good to me, and I did very well at that company, and they accelerated my growth professionally. And I'll always be grateful for that organisation for giving me that opportunity, and then went into some other things. But I ended up in cyber, sort of 4 or 5 years ago. And I've just, the minute I joined, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a really good industry, and obviously at the moment it's going crazy. I guess to draw the parallel, how one serves the other, I would have always thought that there was nothing in common between the two. But as I lead this business sort of into this sort of next financial year, I've never been more grateful to have had that educational background and clinical experience, because ultimately I really feel that cybersecurity is about behavioural change.
I mean, it's a good segue into another question I want to ask you about. I've heard you speak before, and particularly about cognitive dissonance in security, and I'm keen to understand and I guess share with the listeners what is that, and how do you think that impacts organisations from a cyber perspective?
Well, the term of cognitive dissonance was actually, the monkey, it comes from a guy called Fastinger in the 1950s, who was one of the first he was a pioneer in social psychology. And I mean, ultimately, or to surmise it into one word, and we can go over a little bit more, but it's about inconsistencies, right? We all have what we have, like a social schema, they call it, which is the way that we look at our relationships and things that are external. Then we have our internal schemas of who we are and our view of the world. When I talk about cognitive dissonance being about inconsistencies, every day we battle with what we have a belief system about, and then what we are told by the world or what we learn. Now, I'll tell you, and my ex-wife will tell me, and my partner might do, but I can be a very stubborn person, because often with my schema of the way I see the world, I find it very hard to be wrong on some stuff. But my growth as a person, and it's a really good quote, and I think it was actually, and I hate to bring this guy up, but I actually wrote it down for the benefit of this session, but I think it was Bezos, and Bezos said, the smartest people are consistently revising their understanding, reconsidering a problem they thought they'd already solved. They're open to new points of view, new information, new ideas, contradictions, and challenging their own way of thinking. So my challenge as a person is always about, if I think I'm right about something, then I think that I'm right. So I'll give you an example, which is a pretty classic one about what dissonance really is. And I as a younger man, I smoked cigarettes. Now, at the time, and they didn't even have the pictures on the packets at the time, but I knew that smoking was expensive, made me stink, would give me cancer, and I worked in the cancer field when I smoked as well, but I still did it, right? Now, I also know that so I had this massive conflicting view. So what happens when you have that contradiction, you have this thing called, I guess, resistance to change. So even though you know that it's not the right thing to do, and it's a lifelong belief, there's empirical evidence, there's clinical evidence, there's people in your family that die of it, I would still go and spend my money to go and buy a cigarette and do it and normalize it. Now, if I look back retrospectively, that's so crazy, because my view of the world, I would normalize and rationalize was a bad behavior. Now, I can go into it, for all of it, but ultimately it's about that way that we have our belief challenge. Now, in this industry and in my business with my wonderful colleague, Simon Khan, I realize that people always have this same thing. People know if they click on a link or they get an email from the post office or a text message or they get vished or something, they know they shouldn't do it, but they're social engineered and they still do it. So, I'd love to think that this was my phrase, but I reckon if I Google it, it's probably someone else has said it. But I do think we have cyber dissonance. I think that we know there's good stuff that we know our password shouldn't be 123 password or whatever it is, but people still do it. The breaches are still happening. The bad hygiene in business is still happening because they know they shouldn't, but they don't. So the way to package it all up is, I feel that if we can just deal with that or help people change in a better way, we can get better hygiene and better cyber outcomes, because invariably the big stuff happens as a result of people doing the things they know they shouldn't be doing, but they've still done them.
I think it comes back to the desired path and how, it's a bit like town planners, how they put bike paths in certain places and then the cyclists actually just ride over the grass because it's much quicker to get there. And I think that's the same thing in business. It's the desired path, or people are just trying to get their jobs done. And phishing's a little bit different, I suppose, clicking on links. But things like sharing documents with your Gmail address, or, people do that because they think they're getting productivity out of that. And, as you said, they know that there's risk in what they're doing, but they do it anyway because their desire to achieve that particular outcome is stronger than their desire to, I guess, toe the cyber line. So probably a whole other podcast. But so tell me a little bit about Jumpstart. So your company, very focused specifically on startups and smaller organisations with low staff numbers but high revenue. So what's the risk to these businesses that you're solving for?
Jumpstart's core mission is to help small business owners simplify the problem of cybersecurity. And it's topical we're speaking today because, look, Claire, there's not a day that goes by where my Google alert doesn't go off for something in cyber. I mean, it's on the hour now. We had all this stuff with the ransomware stuff yesterday. The advice is appalling in many ways from, what the powers that be, because they're still trying to solve the problem. Nobody's getting it right. Nobody can get it right, and nobody can stop it. Jumpstart is actually a risk reduction business, and it's just going into smaller businesses, like you say, that have got lower headcounts but high revenues to sort of protect their IP. I think 10 years ago, like the raison d'etre of a criminal was to go and try and smash into like the infrastructure of ANZ or Commonwealth Bank. I mean, that's not gone away. And the head of ANZ, I think, came out the other day and said, they're getting 8 to 10 million attacks on their infrastructure every day. But these guys have got a SOC. They've got great tools. They've got every endpoint, thing in the world. They've got smart people protecting that perimeter. But I think the criminal, my point is always that the criminal is the one that's displaying innovation. like everyone else, we're only ever responding, right? So you're only ever paying catch up. So that's a battle that you can never really win. But the criminals then pivoted over to looking at these smaller businesses, because it's not even money, I think, that's important at the moment. It's the data, right? It's people's personal information. And I think being able to perforate an ecosystem that's got pretty poor defenses because they don't know what they're doing, they've not got the knowledge internally in the business to ring fence their business effectively. Because again, I'm not about selling someone a really big new shiny piece of software, because I think if you've got a 365, or you've usually inherently got those controls, but they're not optimized, and you've not got good cadence in your business operations. So my business is about three things: people, process, technology. That's not mine. That's the government's line. That's the guys that have come before me. I've not pinched it, but I'm going to leverage what excellent, smart people have done about how you can get good hygiene. And I've just simplified those three particular verticals and help those businesses get across those things. I give them visibility on where they currently are today, where they should be, which is in their industry, and I'm the custodian to help them to get there. And that's my business, making it as simple as I can.
There must be an element of what you're offering these clients around compliance, because allowing a framework or a best practice or a standard set of principles allows you to scale and help lots of organisations at once. I'm interested to know your position on sort of compliance versus security, because compliance is only going to get you so far. How can compliance in and of itself achieve secure outcomes for businesses?
In the particular subset or the cohort of customers that I'm working with, which are those guys that hold an AFSL license or have got somebody that mandatorily has to report into CPS 234, but now people know they have to have something in place, right? So my position on compliance now is that a lot of the people that are in the boards of these positions, and I'm speaking to the expert, literally the person that wrote the book on it, these guys now have got a responsibility, and there'll be a test case in the next 12 months where someone is going to get whacked for getting whacked, and that drives behavioral change. My tool gives a business owner visibility on who's being compliant and watching the awareness stuff, who's signed up to read the policies and the procedures, and what they want to go around their board room table is, how are we doing on accounts, CFO, HR, how are we doing for headcount? What's our churn like this week? Cyber, which has now got a seat at the table, finally. What's our compliance looking like? Where are we with that? I'm trying to ultimately give businesses that internal mechanism whereby they can see what their risk is with their personnel. Now, the consequence of this has been for me, and the bit that's made me excited about compliance, I still can't believe I'm saying that in the same sentence, but I am, is that people that are now going out to their customers to say, we are compliant. Our staff have all been trained. This is our data management policy. You're our customer. We care about you. Cybersecurity is important to us. So now the tool that I've got has now become a marketing tool for those customers to say to their customers and their third parties, this is our standard. Now, what's been crazy for us and a learning that we didn't expect, but I'm embracing, is now their customers and their third parties want to have the same standard in terms of their policies and their procedures. And so they've become our customers as well. So it's metastasized out quickly, because by showing everyone that you've got good policies, procedures, compliance, showing them what the staff have got, the board member feels safe, the owner feels safer because they're doing all they can. That doesn't stop someone doing something stupid, but on the count back, they can say, as a business, we've done everything we possibly could have done to avert something going wrong.
I feel like what you've just described is more and more organisations seeing this compliance level of security as a ticket to the game. So no longer can you say you don't have either compliance or, additional security measures. You have to have at least that base level of assurance that you're doing, as you said, what you can to secure your organisation. And obviously by saying, we've got this in place, it's having a flow-on effect to fourth and fifth suppliers down the chain.
It's a tough sell for a smaller business, right, than the enterprise, because it's a new cost center. It's a new problem, and people have heard about it. They read about it all the time, but people don't really know what it means. And until experientially it happens to you, trying to get a small business owner that might be running 10 cafes or something like that, it's very difficult for them to sort of become an evangelist. So half the work, and this goes back to what we were talking about at the start, it's that dissonance, right? They know they probably should do something about it. Are they going to do it? My barista's not turned up in 2 of my shops this morning. I can't sell coffee. You know what I mean? That's some of the mindset of some of the people that we're dealing with. It's just a new challenge.
So given the growth in your business, which is fantastic that, for such a young organisation, you're growing month on month.
Yep.
For you, what does the future look like in cyber, given this constant evolution in our industry and given, I guess, the startup space that you're in? What do you think the future looks like?
I think the future is this dark room and no one can shine a light on it, because who would have thought, upon reflection about what's just happened in the last 18 months, what's happened is unfathomable. I'm obviously a POM. I've got no idea if I can ever see my parents when I can see them, or travel for business, or take the kids away on holiday, or anything. But I think in terms of what cyber, I think there's just going to be more attacks. I think the methodology will probably be tweaked, but they don't really need to change the ransomware stuff because that's old hat anyway, and it's going great. As an enterprise, those guys are going good. The phishing stuff's still going to work. I think that the market and all of the big vendors, all of the big research companies, all of the big shops, the big four look at the big four. If the big four have a change in their behavior and their headcount, then something's right? Accenture, PwC, these guys all are expanding those teams very, very aggressively. And there is a lot of smart people who move into this space. I think there's going to be more problems. I think there's going to be more challenges. And I think that anyone thinking that there's, like I say, and I use this in my bio, this word, and I always feel a little bit more intelligent than I am using it, but there's no panacea to solving this problem. I think I see much more challenges ahead, and I see there being maybe some. I thought it was interesting last week when we had all of the banks all got whacked by the Akamai, the piece. Again, I'm just always astounded there hasn't been something of more significance that's happened on an infrastructure level.
Yeah, well, I think the space you're playing in is incredibly important. And as a small business owner, I think it is a difficult investment for people to make and to understand as well. For big business, understanding your return on cyber investment is really challenging, let alone if you're a small organisation kind of trying to find your way as a startup in everything, let alone in cybersecurity. So I think you're doing great things, and this is not a paid advertisement. I really wanted to share with my audience what you and your business partner are doing. So thanks so much for joining me today, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you want more information on any of our guests, head to thesecuritycollective.com/podcast. This podcast is produced by East Coast Studio. I'm Claire Pales, and I look forward to seeing you next week.